Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to my studio. My name is Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to be looking at your paintings. The paintings that you guys have made alongside me, or maybe live, or maybe a few hours later, or in some cases months later, because there's many people who have just kind of joined the class and are starting from episode 1 or 0 and are slowly working their way forward, trying to catch up with us. So we'll see a couple of images like that today. But for the most part, what we're going to be looking at is the art that was created between episodes 11 and 20. So episode 11 was Giovanni Morandi, and then episode 20 was Alex Katz. We looked at the first 10 last week, and we'll look at the next 10 in maybe a month from now when we get those 10 all the way done, even though we're at episode 23 or so, I think, right now. So that's what the plan today is. We're going to spend a little bit of time looking at each one of those groups. We're going to look at everybody's paintings from each of those 10 artists that we made paintings based on. So I'm super excited about that, and I'm also super excited to announce that we now have a dedicated Facebook group or community group for our class. So that was something that came up in Thursday's episode. People saying, hey, we should have a community where we can kind of post our images and we can kind of talk outside of class and all that kind of stuff, and which is maybe a little bit tricky to do while you're watching the episode, because maybe you're painting along and all that kind of stuff. So here's an opportunity. There's the link to this Facebook page is right at the very first thing in the image description below, and my wife just created it about an hour ago, so you can see it's still rough. I haven't customized it or anything. But one of the things, too, when you first join, there's a couple of questions you got to answer, just so we make sure that the people that are in this group are people like yourself, and just kind of create a nice, safe space so that we don't have also being bombarded by ads from all over the place, which incidentally is one of the weirder things that I've noticed. Every once in a while, there's people trying to sell tickets to this show on my Facebook page, which is super random. So obviously the class is free, and don't buy tickets, therefore, from some weird stranger on the internet to this class. Anyway, people will think of anything to make a buck. So let's get right into it. I'm doing a lot of hand movement right now. I guess it's because I'm kind of excited, and usually I've got paintbrushes and stuff to hold on to. So the first thing I wanted to kind of just show is here's some art by somebody who's, where did this go? Nope, I want to get rid of that. Somebody who's just beginning the class. So here's Deborah, this is just a message she sent me earlier today. Hey, I'm on episode 1. I'm super excited. And I think those of you that are, this might seem like a long time ago when we did this first color wheel. And so I'd be really interested to hear your words of encouragement and advice for somebody who's just beginning the class. So you can put that in the comments there. And what it feels like now, 23 episodes or wherever we are into the course, and how you feel about your project. So here's another student that has just joined us, and she's here working on her first painting. This was the Sonia Delaunay painting that we made while we were making our color wheel. So I think that's super exciting. And here's her version of the Hilma af Klint painting. And you know and so obviously these are great starts, right? I actually really like kind of the dark, warm colors that were used in both of those paintings. And I want to show you another painting. This one here is by Sharon, and you can see here on the right is her first version of this Hilma af Klint painting. And then on the left is the new version. And I want to show this right off at the beginning because this is, again, I think a lot of people are like, oh, okay, well, you know, I'm still learning, and what would be the point of going back and reproducing this painting? Like, it's a circle on some squares. And you can see, like, whoa, like, the quality of this painting just leaps forward a month later on. So as we looked at the last time we did one of these feedback episodes, and I showed you, what was it, the Sonia Delaunay painting by Charmaine, and how that changed radically from the very first time she painted it to the second time. I think it's really exciting to go back to a painting, whether it's a painting you really liked, that you felt you did really well at, or a painting where you felt like there was room for improvement. Going back and doing that painting a second time, a third or fourth or fifth time, is a really great experience. Usually, I'd say 90% of the time, it leaves you feeling like, wow, I have really learned something. This is amazing. Look how much better it is the second time around. Now, I will say, it is possible that that you go back and you try to do that painting again, and it turns out the same or worse. And of course, that is a super disappointing feeling, to feel like, oh, I'm actually worse than when I started. But what I would say is that is very unlikely, and it's just, you know, you can chalk that up to kind of the beginner's luck. So, you know, there's, for instance, I have a bunch of friends who love playing poker. I'm like the worst. I don't gamble. I don't buy lottery tickets or anything. And they're always having, if I ever join them, they always have to explain the rules to me again. And they're just like, ugh. But I'm one of those things, like, I seem to win every time I play. Maybe I should be playing poker more often, but it drives them absolutely nuts because obviously they've been playing for years, and they come in and I'm like, okay, so which card, like, what do I do here if I've got 3 aces? And they're like, oh my goodness. But so it's always possible you could do really, really amazing work the very first time around. But I would say, by and large, if you were to try doing any of your paintings again, they are going to get better. Okay, so let's pick up where we left off last time. There are more artworks that people have sent me of the other paintings that we did in between, like the Van Gogh painting. But I do think, oops, let's go back to, I'm just going to do this off screen. I do think that I want to kind of just move forward, and part of the reason we've got this new Facebook group there is that's an opportunity for you guys to share your work going forward without me having to discuss it like this. Although I'm sure maybe it would be nice. Maybe in the future I'll do, for those of us who just joined us, or a year from now, kind of episode. That could be kind of cool. That would actually be really neat to see all the new paintings, the new versions of people doing this years down the road, when I'm a little bit grayer and a little bit wider. So the first artist we're going to talk about today of the 10 artists is Giorgio Morandi. And boy, oh boy, we did that. I just want to check when did we do this painting? That was October 15th. So a month, just over a month ago, this was the artwork that we made here. So let's look at a few of them. So we'll start out right here. Oops. With Gail's versions here. So she's got, because remember on that episode we did 2 paintings. We started with this one on the left, and then we created a second one on the right. Let me see my big stack of paintings here. You know, one thing, ideally, when you've got all of these paintings together, a good idea would probably be to put something in between them, like wax paper. You can see I haven't done that myself yet, but one thing I have noticed with acrylic paints is sometimes they can stick together. So a bad idea would be to put these together like that and then just sit them on a shelf for weeks and weeks. because what can happen is you try pulling, and then all of a sudden they're like stuck together, and you peel them apart, and then it literally tears a chunk of paint off. So while it's unlikely you're probably going to store your painting face to face like this, sometimes, you know, if your paintings are stacked like I've got, the little bits of blobs of paint that are on the corner edges, those can peel off. Anyway, why, I don't know why I just mentioned that. I guess because I just have this big, I am asking for trouble here by doing this. Anyway, so let's just take a look. I'll just show you my versions of these paintings. So here was my first version. And then here was the second one here. Personally, I'm much happier with this painting. I felt, and this is the one I did right at the very end of the class with in 20 minutes. So it's interesting, you know, sometimes, and I'm not that I don't think I'm still happy with this, but one thing I always think is interesting is usually I get better it takes a little bit of time to warm up. So sometimes I start out and I'm a little bit rusty, and then like half an hour in, I start kind of hitting my stride, and then, you know, after a couple of hours, like in here, is where I start feeling like I'm doing it better. And then, of course, after about 2.5 hours, you know, so we kind of go up, like, oh, things are going really well. And then after a couple of hours, things start coming back down to earth, and I lose my superpowers. So, but I do think it's interesting, and I think we'll see here that often the paintings that we make a little bit later on into the session might be a little bit better, just because we are warmed up a bit. So again, here's these two paintings by Gail, and I would say that her flowers here are, I think this is a superior painting. I think in general, the Morandi's version of the painting is better, this painting, than the other one. Anyway, but that looks great. I really liked this. The dark outlining on here works really well, and it looks like she actually put even more flowers on here, so made it even like a bigger bouquet of flowers, which I think works well, because on mine there was quite a lot of empty space around the edges. And this one I think is great as well. It looks like that's a shadow just as opposed to paint there, but the colors are, you know, this painting I think is, or both of these paintings, one of the things we talked about during that show is the gray that Morandi is famous for. And so Morandi is a really great artist to look at for developing those grays and then juxtaposing it with those nice bright colors. Like, so for instance, in this painting by Iris, right? Like, look how beautiful those pinks are, and even the greens, when they're surrounded by the muted grays, right? So we have this yellow that we painted over top of, and it's still there, like breathing, like, right? But just a very shallow breathing underneath. Whereas these other, so the contrast of those grays really allows the brighter colors to really shine, because they're not competing with other bright colors. So this is fantastic. This is great. Really nice. Look at this painting. I actually think you've done a better job here, Iris, than I did, especially on some of these, the kind of the darker sides. And that's what I think is really interesting, is how, in pretty much in every case here, there are things that you guys are doing better than me. And maybe that's just because I'm a little bit distracted with all this technology I'm running, and I'm trying to talk and explain things. But it also kind of shows that you guys are really learning and developing very fast, often much faster than you think you are, right? So sometimes that's what's great about seeing all this work together. You're like, oh, actually, I'm doing pretty good. Look at what everybody else is doing. I'm doing pretty good. So here's Peter's paintings. So, and Peter did send me a few from that because he was sending them through Twitter, and as I said last time, I ran out of time to get all of the artwork you guys sent me. So Peter, thank you so much for sending all of your work, and I apologize for not showing some of yours last time. This is great. I actually think, again, there's improvements you made over mine. So there were some of my cups that looked a little bit clumsy in terms of the perspective, so you corrected those. And I really like some of these curving lines on the shape that help give it some volume. Beautiful. And then here, what's interesting, one of our students, Ramon, he sent in some details of his painting. I'm not sure why you did that, Ramon, but what's actually kind of nice about these details, rather than sending in the whole painting, is we can really see kind of the way that you painted it. And this is, again, you know, seeing that little bit of yellow kind of sneaking through and little bits of green and different blues are the kind of things that make a painting special, right? It's that, those, and I mean, there are exceptions to every rule, but I think one of the things that makes painting special and why you want to see it with your own eyes in person is, unlike a print where everything is on the surface, right? Like all of the way that a print is made by a computer is it says, okay, I need some black, or I need some green, or some orange, and it just puts them in these kind of interlocking kind of spaces. And every once in a while it does, like maybe black is often a color that's layered, but for the most part, everything is super flat on the surface of the paper or whatever it's being printed on. Whereas what's exciting about painting is we can layer those colors, and the underpainting or the first wash we put down kind of just bleeds through. It colors the color on top of it. And it's really satisfying as a viewer to look at it and see those things. That's another reason why I really like looking at the sides of paintings. When I go to museums, I'm often kind of looking at people like, what is he looking at? And it's because I like seeing how you can see some of the evidence, you know, on the sides of a painting. Like, you know, even this one here, first one I pick up, you know, up here it's kind of darker colors, but if I look on the edge, I see some of the yellows and oranges kind of filtering through. Anyway, here's Sharon's version of the Morandi. And actually I think this is kind of cool, the way that she's photographed it with like some coral and rocks, which tend to lend themselves quite, you know, it seems to work well for this painting. And, you know, I really like the way that this is painted. This, more than any of the other ones I've seen, reminds me of another artist, a Canadian artist named Philip Gustin, who, I'm going to make a note of that because maybe we should do a Gustin painting. Philip Gustin was a Montreal artist who became very famous for his abstract. He switched from doing abstract paintings to kind of cartoony representational paintings kind of midway through his life. Anyway, we'll talk about him when we actually paint his. But this, great painting. I think this works really well. It looks like there might have been a little bit of trouble right up here in trying to fix it. So that's, you know, one thing we'll talk about as we kind of maybe in one of the next sessions, and maybe I'll deliberately make a few mistakes and then try to fix them. Common mistakes people might make. And one of the things can be like this. Let's say you do your background and then something happens and then you want to fix it, and then you're trying to paint this, and it seems to almost draw more attention to itself. Which is why I often suggest, if you have made a quote-unquote mistake, sometimes just to leave it towards the end, because sometimes what appears to be a mistake just sort of evaporates and disappears, and then we're like, wait a second, I knew I was saving something here to fix, and I don't even, where did it go? Where's the problem? Because it just sometimes just disappears once more paint gets onto the canvas. But I think ultimately that painting worked out really well. Here's a couple by Shelley McCool. Wow, look at these. I just think, what beautiful colors here. So in yours, or in this one that Shelley did here, she's actually allowed a little bit more of the color to come through than I did. My painting ended up being quite gray. I really covered it with a lot of gray. Whereas these ones, that color is kind of shining through a little bit more. And I think it works really well. I actually think this kind of pink purple under here is a really smart alteration, because it really works well in kind of to balance out these bright pinks that are in the flowers. So that's another thing I think I've mentioned before, but if you're going to use a color in some part of your painting, it's always a good idea to have an echo of it somewhere else in the painting, just so that that one color isn't just standing by itself, like shouting out, you know. It's nice to have like give it a friend. Give it a little bit of company. Okay, and then lastly here, this is Terry's painting. And what is great about this is how the painting has been framed. And also, there's some changes that they've made to the painting. You know, I could see moving a few boxes around, which is, again, great. You know, if you're going to do a still life like this, there's no reason why you can't make changes to it, right? So there's a few little alterations there. Colors are a little bit different. I think it's great. But what makes me even happier than anything is the fact that the painting, at the end of the day, has been framed, right? So it can be a little bit tricky to hang up. Well, you know, I'll use a Morandi painting here. You know, it can be a little bit tricky to hang a painting like this because there's nothing really to hang on. Like, you can glue something on here. You could something that you could hang. You could glue a string onto the back. Maybe it'd be worthwhile talking about this. If you're interested in hearing a little bit more about how to hang art, I could do a whole episode on that. Let me know in the suggestions if you're interested. But a great way to display a painting like this, the kind of the simplest way, is just to get a cheap frame. And you know, you can get cheap frames from the dollar store. In the same place that you bought these cheap canvases for $1, you can get a frame, maybe not as nice as the one Terry's got there, but for, you know, a couple of dollars, $4. You can go to IKEA. I get a lot of my frames from IKEA because they're like $5 to $20 for some like really big frames. And I used to actually build frames myself. That was a company I used to own, is making custom frames, and I've made frames that are in major museums around the world, but they are expensive to make. To get a custom frame made, you know, could easily cost $500 to $1,000 for something relatively small. Again, if it's going to be in a museum for hundreds of years, that might be, you know, $500 is not that big of an investment. But if we're talking about framing one of your paintings, you might think of like $500 is a little steep. Well, $5 is not, right? Especially when it comes to taking your artwork and showcasing it. And I think the more of these paintings that you are surrounding your home with, the more you're going to feel that sense of confidence going up. And whether it's confidence in making art or just confidence in general, right? If you start feeling like, hey, you know what, like, I'm kind of liking these paintings I'm making, I'm feeling pretty good about myself, then that starts to bleed into the rest of our lives, where you're like, huh, you know, I feel like I have like a greater purpose on this planet than just like going to work every day and eating and sleeping and repeating. You know, like, I feel like there's a possibility of me expressing myself and my experience. And that is like, I mean, to be able to have that extra little bit of pep in your step every day, I think a lot of people would give anything for that, right? And which is, just as a quick little sidebar, is also one of the reasons that why art education is really important for children in K through 12. You know, often we talk about like the STEM program, like science, technology, English maybe, and math. And STEAM is the addition to that, where we add the little A for art. Because often, even if somebody wants to be a mathematician or a scientist or a doctor, having had the experience of learning to paint or draw or sculpt or play violin or write poetry, all of those things activate the right side of the brain, right? If I think I always get them mixed up, but yeah, the right side of the brain is the more creative part of our intelligence. The left side manages your lists and your grocery, what you got to get to make the pie, and I got to be at work at 9. But the right side of our brain helps us with the more creative tasks. And if you're a doctor or you're a accountant, being able to be creative and overcome like certain problems is really helpful, and it's really great as you age as well. Anyways. Peter says E stands for engineering. Peter and M. Taylor both said that, yes. So yeah, science, technology, engineering, and math, right? And then that's, so of course, because English would be part of art, right? Okay, so look at all these great paintings for the Morandi. I'm super excited, you guys. Great jobs, great job. Why did I just switch to my coffee cup? Maybe because I need to take a sip of tea. And also you could see that that's actually tea in there, not some other type of fluid. Although whatever you want to consume while we're in these, you could certainly do it. When I've taught in person, there was definitely some people that would go and have a couple glasses of wine before class, and they seem to really enjoy it. The class a little bit more. Although towards the end, they're getting a little bit sleepy. Okay, so we're going to move on here to the paintings by Emily Carr. And actually, let's take a look at mine. So, and I'm not showing you mine really to compare to yours, but I also want to give myself some feedback, and kind of maybe it might be helpful for you to think about like how when I look at my art, what I'm noticing and where I might see room for improvement. So the first thing I'm looking at, the first thing I think about is maybe the sky that I did here. I might have left a little bit too much of this peachy color underneath. I think it's kind of nice. I don't think, if I recall, Emily Carr had anywhere near that much color showing through. And it could work maybe if this was not quite as warm or peachy. I think that I would have done that a little bit differently. Another thing I think is a little odd is how this hillside comes and then disappears on here. And you will see in a few other ones the same sort of thing. I think probably, and again, I'm not even going to look at Emily Carr's original one, but I think there is a little bit of an odd thing here. But it's often, when you're working on a painting, you're just nose deep in it. And it's not until, afterwards you walk away and you're like, looking at it like, oh, what? How did I forget that? Or what was I thinking, right? So sometimes that's why putting your painting aside for a couple of days or a couple of hours, especially if you feel the urge to destroy it and tear it up or paint over it, just let it sit there. It costs $1 for one of these canvases, right? So don't get too precious with them and feel you're going to paint over it because you're going to save yourself $1, right? Get another canvas, leave this one to the side, let it kind of like pizza dough rise overnight, and sometimes you feel very differently about it, positive or negative. So just quickly to wrap up here on this one, other little things, that my initial lines that I drew over there might have been a little bit dark, which is why you can see them, not a big deal. I also felt I might have gone a little dark down here, which I think we'll see in a few of these paintings by other people, lightened up there. And maybe while they were listening to me, you're like, oh, he's saying he's did a little too dark, so I'm going to kind of lay off. This is a gorgeous painting by Deborah. Holy smokes, look at this. This great. I mean, I actually think there's a number of improvements over mine here. I think, you know, the instinct to not paint this quite as dark in the bottom right corner, which is, I think, was a problem in mine, has been certainly solved there. I also think it just sort of, it feels a little bit more cohesive than mine. Mine was a little bit brighter and candy colored. This one feels maybe a little bit more believable in terms of like the colors being a little bit more realistic, and you can see that she didn't bring out as much of the odd color in the sky that I put there. So that's great. This works really well. I do feel like this, the way that the ground curves down there just makes it feel like the ground, there's a little bit more of a dramatic valley that's going to form here. And if this was a farmer trying to get up and down here in their tractor, I'm sure that she would be a little bit leery about taking that tractor down the hill. But again, I think it's great painting. That works really well. So here's Gail's version of the painting. Let's zoom in here. Ah, it's beautiful. So I think everything here is working really well. I'm really pleased with how this works. I also think that your sky is turned out really nice. This is a beautiful version of the sky. I like the variation in the blues here. And again, you filled in some of those areas that I left a little bit blank on mine. So I think that works. Little things that I'm noticing, there's a lot of white in here, like and I do think that some of this white starts to look like a little bit of snow. Like, you know, I'm originally from Calgary, Alberta, and every once in a while we would get a little bit of snow in the middle of summer, right? And if you're in Alberta, you know what I'm talking about, right? So it kind of feels like there was one of those surprise snowstorms or hailstorms on here. So a little bit too much white. I would just add a little bit more color into that white going forward. And I can see in my own painting, I did the same sort of thing. You can see there's little areas of white on there. It's just a matter of just adding a little bit more paint into the white. The other little thing, and you could see when I was talking about this horizon, right, and we have the water here, there is a little bit of a change here that we notice. So if I was to do my painting again, what I would do to help everybody would have been to carry this hillside further over here, because I think it suggests it can create a problem where this water seems to be kind of higher than other places, almost like this is a dam or something. And maybe, who knows, maybe it could be a dam, I don't know. This is Iris's version of the painting. Beautiful. Wow, look at that. I think a few of the things that are working really well is you have a little bit more of some darker lines on here. So a little bit of darker outlining is working really well. Like these houses. This is better than my version of these houses. Fantastic. I feel like yours, there's a little bit more definition. It's almost like your camera is in better focus than mine. Like I missed focus. Oh, sorry. Are we looking? Yeah, sorry. Here's your paint. I was talking about mine here. So sorry. Your version, Iris, of these houses is better than mine. The sky, fantastic. Like this is great. The last couple skies have been fantastic. Like they're much more of an impressionist. So we still see a little bit of that orange coming through, but it's sort of like what I was talking about when we were looking at Ramon's images of the Morandi painting, where you just see little tiny pieces of it. I think that's more satisfying. One thing I would suggest is, where are we going here? Is some of these dark lines in the far shore, on that far side, by the edge of the horizon, you might want to just think about adding a little bit more white to them. Because one of the things, we expect things that are closer to us to be in sharper focus because of our we're so used to seeing photographs all the time, so we think of things closer to us as being in sharper focus, but we also expect them to be, the color to be more saturated and the contrast between light and dark to be more intense. Versus the further things get away from us, we expect the color, the saturation of the color to go down and to become more pastel, so adding more white to the color. And then also the contrast to be less intense. So if you go for a hike or a jog and you look at some mountains or any kind of like a downtown, like if you go for a long run and you can see big buildings far away from you, you'll notice that you look at a building closer to you, it could be made of the same material, but the one closer to you is obviously going to be in sharper focus, but the further ones are going to just, the color's been desaturated, right? And that's because there's more atmosphere, right? Little bits of air, H2O, that is in the air, so it creates that atmosphere that makes everything have a little bit of a foggy quality, even if it doesn't look like fog. So anyway, just long story short is, when you're painting something really far away, you generally want to kind of lay off of some of the darker lines. And of course, having said that, there are thousands of well-known artists who really played with depth in their paintings and would deliberately do what you've done here, because they wanted to kind of invert the classical ideas of painting. And especially actually around the time Emily Carr's making these paintings, there were, Picasso and the Cubists and the Fauvists and the Futurists and all the other ists, all the other movements out there really wanted to kind of flatten the picture. So would deliberately paint the far areas like that. Here's May's version. Cool. Look at all these nice brushy paint brushes, brush strokes, I mean. So, and this is something I've noticed a lot with May's painting, is there's kind of like a speed and an immediacy of the painting, which I think is really satisfying, right? You really feel the energy in the way that she makes these paintings. So, I also feel like the brush, I don't know if these canvases might be kind of small, or just the brush that she's using is a little bit bigger, but we do have kind of like these nice big confident brush strokes, which is great. Nice colors. I don't have too much more to add because as you'll see, like obviously some of the feedback I have is very similar from artist to artist. So well, we got a bunch here, so maybe I'll just I'm only on artist number 2 here of 10, so I'll speed through a little bit because I think we sort of get what I'm saying here. So here's Peter's version of Emily Carr's painting, really, really nice. And you can see the difference too in this hillside back here, right? No dark lines, which helps push it further away. The one thing I would say is that it does almost appear like there's a bit of, like this is rain. And I'm not sure why that looks a little bit like that. I think it does seem almost a little bit like this blue is on almost coming forward on top of this hillside. I don't know if that's the color, or this could just be maybe solved with a quick little brush stroke of this same color, or even this green over top, just to separate the hill and the sky and help push that sky back. Because there's always like, what kind of little technique or clue, as I like to think of it, can I give the audience to help them put one thing in front of the other? And when we literally put a brush stroke in front of the other one, it kind of pushes something backwards, right? This is great. Good. Here's Ramon's version of it. Wow, this is really nice. Okay, so Ramon, who has a little bit of art experience already, and I feel like has really taken some of the stuff we were doing and put it up to the next level. So one of the things I fiddled with in my painting is a lot of unnecessarily stuff down here, and so maybe he saw me struggling there and decided to kind of just isolate those same darker colors into this kind of hedge or the near cliff or hill. So that really, you can feel in this painting, maybe more so than any of the others, the depth, right? We can really feel that this is closest to us, and then this is our middle ground, and then that's much further away. So he's really using, because this, you could feel these are nice warm blues, ultramarine blue, and then we have this cool cerulean blue in the background, right? So there's this has got a lot of nice depth here. So, you know, that's great. It makes me so excited when people exceed me and make paintings better than me. Wow, look at this Charmae's painting. Wow. This is great. Like, you know, quite a different, like this here, there's like a softness to the brush strokes, right? There's very little sharp edges. And then when we look at Charmae's, it's like the opposite, right? We have much more defined brush strokes, like very bright colors, totally different kind of energy, which I think is great. I think it's so interesting to see where we start and then where we finish, and often we kind of go in our own directions and our own style comes through here. This is great. Wow. You know, I feel like a nice energy, like maybe more so than anybody else is also, like I feel like I feel some brush strokes really going off in one direction, and then other brush strokes going in a different direction. And so there's a kind of a zigzag of movement from the sky and then down in here and then with this diagonal. And it could, I don't know if Emily Carr intended that to happen, but especially when I see this painting, it makes me think, oh, maybe that was like in Emily Carr's mind, or maybe she did a sketch of this, really thought of kind of these contrasting diagonals in here. And so Charmaine's really bringing that to the surface. That's fantastic. Here's Sharon's version. Wow, look at that. Very cool. Wow, I love these kind of these purples that you've got in here. Now, I think it is a little bit dark. I think it's just the way that's photographed, I imagine. But you know, again, what a different painting. Same place but different painting. There's a lot of energy in here. You can see like the way that these trees have been painted. And actually, I'm looking at mine, a lot like mine. They feel like little tiny circles. So I can imagine pointillism being something that Sharon could be interested in going forward. Here's Shelley McCool. Oh, wow. So that reminds me, there's a lot similar here in these two, in Sharon and Shelley, in terms of the brush strokes, like not quite as dramatic as Charmaine's here, but man, these are great. So one thing, I feel like a lot of you guys used a lot of purple really well in your paintings to really create a nice contrast to the blue in the picture, because the purple is and the red or the oranges, right? Because the purple's kind of in between, but it has a kind of a nice little outlining tool. I think it works really well. Beautiful. And then here's Susan's. Ooh, look at these. This feels, these really, really bright reds and blues. This reminds me a lot of like the Fauvist artists and Matisse, Vlaminck, and just the way that, oh, do we have even more? Okay, I thought we were in the last one. Okay, just really quickly here. So we have like these bright reds and blues right next to one another, and that makes this painting really pop. Like much more, like if we go back to Ramon's here, there is bright colors, but they're a little bit more pastel than Susan's. She's got more full-on bright colors. And then here we have Vania, and again, really cool. It's interesting to see the different colors that people are putting down in the background too, right? So this one's a little bit more subdued sky, not quite as intensely orange as what I mixed in here. And I think that works really, really well. And this hill in the foreground, I think, is great. That really helps lock it down. Wow. Whew, good work, you guys. Good job. And there's so many comments coming into the chat there that, let me see. Oh yeah, Mason. Macy, she's using 8x10. So with May, I would suggest, where was your painting? Where'd it go? Oh, here we are. I would suggest maybe using a smaller brush, because you're saying you use an 8x10 canvas, which is about the same size I'm using. So one of the things you may want to do is have a little more variety of paintbrush sizes, because some of these work really, really well. And then when we get into some of the finer details, using a small brush for some of this, actually for the stuff in the foreground, it works really well. But some of these a little bit further on, I think could use, because I think you'd also find it easier to do some of these smaller details, like the houses. Great jobs. Deborah says Ramon's reminded them of the lavender hills. I can smell the aroma. Yes. Okay. So our next painting is Juan Miro. All right. Oh my goodness, I love this painting. Or not, I'm not talking about mine, just the original. Is, you know, what is very fun about this class is kind of changing from one style to another, one period of time to another, back and forth, and seeing how, like, we can apply some of these same rules to totally different eras of art, right? And definitely there are artists that really devoted their energy to overturning certain kinds of previously held, like, rules in art. And then there are some artists that really embraced those kind of things as important parts of the structure of and approach to painting. So it's just like anybody, like, rules are made to be broken. So how do we break them in the most interesting way, I think is what I've learned anyway. Okay, so here's my version of the Miro painting. I felt pretty happy with this. I think probably like many of you, I was maybe a little bit surprised as I started painting it, like, wow, I thought this one would go a little bit fast, and it took me a little bit longer than I expected. Because sometimes I think when you see a painting like this, you're like, I could probably do that in 20 minutes. Give me a couple colors, I'll be done. And then I'll have lots of time to lift my feet up and relax. And then once you start, you're like, wow, to pull it off and make it look good, I really got to, you know, take some time and approach this carefully. Okay, so let's take a look at, oh, here, let's make this a little bit smaller. Everything fit on here. Okay, so this, and here, I think this is the same one, just a little bit cropped. So very cool. You know, I think this worked out really well. I mean, I can see a few areas where it looks like the paint, because we did do an underpainting of yellow, a yellow with a lot of white, and then we went back over it with, I think, almost pure warm, or would this would have been the cool yellow. So we went back over top of it, and it looks like might be a little bit of, you can see some of the underpainting there. Does it matter? I don't think so at all. A little thing here, and this, I did not do a good job of pointing this out because I don't think I even realized it until later on. But these black blobs, I think, are supposed to be legs, right? And so it looks like mine are still there, but it looks like in this here we've lost a leg. Now, does it mean you should go back in there and join this together? No, not at all. I think what is kind of interesting about all of our work is how we sort of kind of make those little changes. And is it really important? Like, it's an abstract painting that is a little bit funky and weird to begin with, right? So that doesn't bother me at all. I just think it is. I just wanted to kind of point out some of those things, because sometimes people really want to do extra work on their work. Here's Gail's version of the painting. These are great. So it's similar. So we have the same sort of thing here. Maybe this leg has come off a little bit. Again, I don't think anybody would know, even if you looked at the painting a dozen times. But it was. I'm trying to remember. Somebody did write me a couple paragraphs explaining what the painting was about, or what they believe the painting was about. And that there's this. It's a mother who's milking a baby. And I'm like, oh, really? And sort of pointed out parts of the female anatomy that I did not see the first time. And I'm not sure if that's anyway. But we'll move on. Here's Iris's version. Very cool. You can see Iris devoted a little bit more space at the bottom for this character, which maybe is a baby. I don't know. Than I did, which is kind of nice, because everything else got a little bit smaller up top. I mean, I think they're fabulous. These are really super cool. It makes me kind of want to do more paintings like this. This is one of the only kind of abstract paintings we've done so far. Wow, this is cool. Huh. I don't know much that I can add to these paintings. I mean, I'm really excited with where they went. And again, what's super interesting is just to see the slight, maybe in this painting more so than any others, we can see a little bit more of the changes that each one of us is making from painting to painting. It looks like Laura's kind of straightened up the background. In mine, I deliberately, it is actually crooked in the original painting, and then I kind of maybe, just like May's version here, right? So this is the back, that horizon is a little wonky in hers and mine, like here's mine again. So there's no reason why you can't straighten it out. I think this is great. It looks, I can see her using a smaller brush for some of these other areas here. And I would say, so with May, you know, like which brush do you use at different times is sort of up to every artist. There's a guy called, is it Howard Hodgkins? I think the artist, he's famous for painting paintings that are like this size, but using like brushes this wide. Not that long, but wide. So big, huge, sometimes where you need not only two hands to manipulate a brush that's like the size of a broom, but often even having somebody else helping him because they're just such ridiculously big brushes. So, you know, the idea of trying to make a painting like this with a brush that big is a little bit absurd. So there are artists out there who do work with big brushes and can do it really well. Obviously, it creates a different kind of look altogether. This looks great. I'm really happy with this. You can see a lot more of the paint texture. It's maybe just because of how close it's photographed. But some people really like seeing the texture of their paint, and some people don't want any texture. Oops, here's Peter's version of the painting. Everything looks great. One thing I would notice is might be missing some of that crazy hair on the character, this guy right here, or woman maybe, who knows. But you know, maybe this is maybe 5 minutes after this here, where this person is so shocked that the hair has actually fallen out. So and then here's another one. All these characters are so fun. Oops, here's Charmaine's version of these. This is great again, and you know, not so much more I can say about these. Again, you can see that this background has been kind of straightened by a few people. It doesn't bother me at all. I think it's great. I'd like seeing here on Susan's that this hair's, it doesn't look like it's black. There's a little bit of blue or purple in it, which is nice. And then I like this outline going down here. Maybe that's, I'd have to look at the original by Miro, but this is kind of a nice little change here, because I think this is a nipple or a breast or something here, and this is maybe the baby. So interesting. Very cool. Wow, look at that. Again, it's like I said, you're not the only one to have these legs kind of separated from the body, but how much does it act? Are they legs to begin with? I have no idea, but certainly interesting to think about. Very cool. Peter said, I just realized I forgot to paint the hair. We'll talk about, well, I don't know if we'll get to it, but there are paintings where I've afterwards realized that I missed a big part of the painting, and it's just, hey, at the end of the day, will anybody else know, or is it only people in this class who will notice that something's missing? So let's move on here to Frida Kahlo's Still Life with Parrot. And let me see. I think this time, why don't we work our way from the bottom up. Come on. Okay. So actually, let's start down here, so people on the opposite side of the alphabet, we'll chat about them a little bit. Okay, so, well, maybe looking at mine here, how do I feel about this? I feel pretty happy overall with this painting. I noticed afterwards a couple things, like the beak that I did on my parrot was much larger than Frida's original. These spots on, I'm not sure exactly what kind of plant this is, but I didn't intend to leave like this. I was planning on going and kind of muting those big white spots, but I forgot at the time, so they're not there. But those are maybe the problems I feel. Other things I like about the painting, I really like the shadows that I did here. I felt like those worked quite well. And that purple in contrast to the yellow, those complementary colors on the opposite side of the color wheel from one another, I think that works really nice. So there's a, as opposed to just using black in here, which probably a lot of other beginners might do, putting in like a gray with a little bit of the complementary color, the opposite color, gives the shadows more life. And so, for instance, if this was a purple background, what we would do is make a gray and put a little bit of yellow into it, and that would be the opposite, right? And so again, we would have that, there would be more life in those shadows. I also remember this here, this, what is now a watermelon seed, was originally, I dropped my paintbrush right in the middle of the canvas and had to figure a way of incorporating it in there, and I was like, okay, well, I guess we're going to have another watermelon seed right there. And actually now that it'd be hard for me to see it any differently. Okay, so let's take a look at your guys' art here. So here's Vania, Lisa. Wow, cool. So a couple, I think what's interesting is again, I think all the things that I liked about my own painting I see reflected in here. I actually really like some of these kind of a little bit more, like there's more texture, I think, in your background than mine, like some of these different colors that work really well. It's also interesting the way that you've outlined the watermelon here. I would probably make this a little bit more green, because it looks a little bit gray and maybe a little bit like less fresh of a watermelon. But otherwise, I think it looks really good. You know, we did, like, afterwards, I was thinking, like, wow, we basically learned how to paint fruit and an animal all in one painting. And so that's a pretty tall ask. And as you'll see in all the other paintings, including this one, like, how you guys rose to the occasion is pretty exciting. So this one worked really well. Again, that purple, I think, is great. Although I would say sometimes just because I think it works really well when it's a little bit more subtle or kind of blended back out. So some of them are a little bit heavy, and it's just about that consistency. But you know, this is fantastic. Wow, holy smokes, what a difference! So this is a slightly more square composition. So very different. Just the way that you've composed this image, and then by moving the parrot right into the center and kind of eliminated the other thing that was there. This works. This is great. Again, really nice. These shadows are really nice down here. Good job. And the parrot too. I think this is a really well executed parrot. Definitely, the beak is better than mine. It's got almost a little bit of a pigeony quality too. I don't know if that was. Did I miss this detail in Frida's? But I think it's great. Wow. I get so excited looking at the work you guys do. One of my favorite things is to see these images roll in after a class. Wow. Look at Shelly. Whoa. Come on. I take my hand off the mouse. I mean, that's what makes it jump. Wow. That is cool. This bird is pretty spectacular. That is a really nice parrot. And I also think these fruits down here are fantastic. Like, these are really believable. Like, I really feel a volume, especially some of these ones down here. The softness with the way that they've been painted and these highlights, that's really exciting. I do think that the shadows could use a little bit of the same sort of love that was given to the fruits. But boy, oh boy, like, and that bird is beautiful. Wow. And this is also the way that you've drawn the inside or painted the inside of this orange is really nice. So there's a lot of really good things going on in that painting. Let's continue. Charmae, wow. The way it's painted, I don't know, maybe it's this, because I feel like maybe you went over a little bit with some yellow. It reminds me of a bit of Paul Gauguin. Like, there's a bit of a, why does that just jump like that? Drive me nuts. And these fruits are fantastic. Like, look at that. That's a beautifully painted, I don't know what kind of vegetable or fruit it is, but really well done. You see, and the way that you've painted the, whatever this is definitely better than mine, because you've gone back here and made these little spots much more subdued. That works out really nice. Wow. Yeah, and so, you know, however you paint your shadows, just as long as you're consistent with them is what makes it really important, right? So you've got a much darker shadow and more well-defined shadow than mine, and you've kind of carried it through here. So as long as they're sort of consistent, the shadows are the same throughout the whole painting, then it doesn't matter which approach you do, right? That's really nice. My goodness, you guys make me so proud. Let's see, how am I doing for? Okay, so I got to speed up a little bit here. Wow, Peter. Here, let's go closer up on Peter's. Cool. Wow. Again, I really like these shadows. Really nice. I like this little bit of green you've got going. It works really well with this yellow. All right, that's working really well for you. It looks like a little bit, and this is partly my fault, is a little bit of too much white and gray on some of these washes. So what I would do in the future is get a little bit more water on your brush. And I know I say you generally don't need any water at all when you're painting with acrylic, but when we're doing some of this wash technique, where we paint something and then we're going very thin color. You just want to, it's almost like the paint, you're washing your paintbrush off. And so when you get that paint on your brush, is just sort of rub it on a cloth even, right? So you get paint on your brush, rub a bit on the cloth, dip it in some water, and then try painting it. And as we go, we're going to be doing the same technique a few other times. So I think you'll get a lot of nice practice using that technique. Okay, here's May's painting. Wow, that's cool. Yeah. So, you know, what I think is really interesting is how different, especially when we're doing all these different paintings by different artists, is that I think it's helpful to sort of think to yourself, like, which painting do I enjoy painting the most? Which painting do I feel like is producing the best results? And some of us are going to have better, you know, are just going to, will feel like it's just easier to paint certain paintings in different styles than others, right? This one I feel works really well. Like there's a real kind of nice, like May's painting style with that kind of thick brush, thick paint. I feel it kind of works well for like still lives, particularly, because we can feel the volume in here. So these work really well. Like I come to, like, for instance, this fruit up here, these shadows, the gray and the purple in there are working really well, and of course the watermelon. Great job. And the bird too. Actually, again, I think you've done a better version of painting the parrot than I did. Wow. Okay, so I got a bunch more here. So I'm gonna cruise. Wow, look at Laura's. So, wow, like a lot more of a bright painting than mine. You certainly got much more of a bright table. I wonder, oops, come on, if this is a cool yellow versus the warm yellow. It's so lemon color that I wonder if that's, like, because it looks like we have that same color here versus this eye, which is a warmer yellow, right? So it does, it makes this painting super neon. It does pop for sure. I would say though that I think a little bit more warmth in here, because what it does is it makes we want the table to be supporting those. Okay, we want the table to be supporting the fruit. And if it kind of moves backwards, it almost makes the fruit kind of be floating in space. So that's why we want to use that warm color. But man, that is bright. Especially all those colors. That is really cool. Very nice. And the watermelon is really well. This right here is also really well, nicely painted piece of fruit. Wow. Look at this. Iris. Cool, great shadows, beautiful shadows, great fruits. Did a better job than this one than I did. And your parrot looks great. I think maybe of all the people, you're the one who also managed to give the best tail to that poor bird. Mine sort of got truncated a little bit because I wasn't thinking about it, but I wonder if you have a bird, Iris. If you're, I feel like you're more generous to that bird than most of the rest of us. Everything looks fantastic in here. This, again, great orange, watermelon. Everything's turning out really great. Like this, you did a better job over here than I did too. So, Gail, wow, cool. Yeah, this watermelon, fantastic. Good shadows, great shadows. I feel like these shadows are really great here. And it got a little less finished over here, but otherwise this one worked out really, really well. Great bird too. Well done. I would also say that this table, again, this feels like it's a little bit of the cool yellow on the table, and I would just try to keep that a little bit on the warmer side of things. But again, that could just be the way that these photographs were taken. Oh, smokes. Wow, this is great. This is our final one for Frida. Great one to end off with. You know, what actually is kind of nice here is we have a little bit more of this bright, and again, this could just be the photograph and the lighting, but this feels a little bit cooler versus the warmer yellow over here, which, you know, the light is coming from the right side of the painting. Everything looks fantastic. I think you've done a better job here with some of these fruits than I did, for sure. I actually really like the shadows. This gray in here works really well. I would maybe add a little bit more purple to it, but boy, oh boy. Good job. Wow, good job, you guys. Wow, you guys are exceeding me once again. Okay. Ah! Okay. Should be able to hear me now. Not sure what happens. My apologies. Okay. Okay, so how about let's go back here. Just for those, since who knows how long I've been without, I saw some kind of glitch coming up on my computer, but, Charles Birchfield. So this painting was the one I've gotten the least. I've only got 5 people that sent in images based on it. Probably because people thought it was a little bit complicated. I thought it was a little bit complicated, and when I started painting it, I realized like this could be a little bit tricky. But I just went back to the things that I've been telling you guys, all of these basic techniques, and just took a deep breath and started painting it, and everything worked itself out. right? So, and I was actually really surprised and very happy. I really like the colors that I used in this painting. It has like a really intense neon quality, not using any different paints than we've used before, but it's again that contrast of the grays that works really, really well to make those colors pop, right? If I had used bright blues here and, bright purples, then these areas inside here would not be so bright and strong. It would just become a very, very bright painting. So it's the contrasting use of the bright colors with the toned down colors and the tinted colors that help give those other colors. Like it's like you could kind of think of it like a spotlight on an actor on a stage, right? So like if the entire stage is lit and we see all of the other actors standing there and their costumes and see the orchestra, it's really beautiful. But if there's one person standing on the front of the stage and they're trying to talk while all that other action is going on because the lights are on and everyone else is singing, you're like, who am I supposed to be looking at? Whereas if we dim the lights down, we focus on one person and everybody else, shuts up and the lights are down, then that one person really shines because we're really we're focusing the viewer's attention, right? So this I felt worked out really well. So let's take a look at some of the artwork that you guys created in response. So here's Deborah's painting. This I think is fantastic. Gorgeous painting. Really, really, this in fact, in many places, I actually had a double take when I first saw it. I was like, is this the original Birchfield painting or is this, oh no, it's Deborah's painting. Wow. Like this kind of warm light in here in the snow, even better than I did because I didn't really have any blue down there. So really feel this works really. You also put a lot more detail into these trees. Absolutely gorgeous, really. And I think you also did a better job of painting these birds or whatever than I did. I put them in the exact opposite place, right? I put them all in the center. And then I realized after I had done that Birchfield actually had put them around the edge. So you were looking a little bit more carefully at the original painting than I was. Let's look at May's version of the painting. Like, look, again, really nice. Like, I think people, if they saw this, would say, wow, where did you get that yellow? Where did you get this green? Like, were you using some expensive neon paints like ultra high density pigment, which you can buy, right? But you can see what's really nice is the contrast. It's the use of these grays and these browns that really let these colors in your painting sing, right? They just they're so intense that they wouldn't be that way if there was other bright colors surrounding it. This works out really well. I'm really, really pleased with this version of the painting that you did make. Here's Peter's version of the painting. Oops, that's too big. Very cool. The sun coming through these trees works out really well. I also really like the way that you've got these the trees above here and these kind of spiky, kind of dangly things like I did as well. That works out really well. So, and they kind of echo the shape of the sun. And then in the background here, this appears almost a little more menacing than mine in that I feel like this looks like the inside of a body or something, right? These kind of very fleshy pinks and reds. It looks to me like the inside of a chest cavity, like the ribs and everything. So that's really cool. Very nice. These are great, you guys. And then here's Shelley's version of the painting. Let's zoom in here. Wow. Again, I think most people avoided painting this painting because they thought it was going to be a really difficult painting. And it probably wasn't on the easier end of things, but I think every single painting we've seen so far is a spectacular painting. What I would hope is that more people, after seeing these, are motivated to try their own. Because I think in every case, when people sent them to me, like, I'm not really happy with it. It's like, but I'm like, what? That's amazing. Look at these. These are cool. So, I mean, not much more to say that I haven't already said. Great colors. In fact, I think you actually did. I tried. You can see mine. You know, I did leave a little bit of halo because in the original, in his painting there is, but here Shelley's managed to integrate that little bit of a slight halo effect around the trees better than I did. So that is really cool. And the sun, right, is also, that's gorgeous. Really nice painting. And I feel also that she resolved this tree down here, which both me or Charles Birchfield and I, there's kind of a weird shape that he painted in there. But I think in here Shelley has integrated it better into the composition. Wow, and here's Sue's version of the painting. Cool. Right, so I really like all this snow here on the sides. Again, we have much more of a glowing effect, right? This feels like the intensity of whatever's happening in this kind of clearing is it feels like it's expanding in yours more so than anybody else's, right? So it's a little bit more intense. Very cool. Good job, you guys. Look at these paintings. Wow. Okay, so how am I doing it? Ooh, I'm only halfway through all the paintings I wanted to get through today. So I'm going to, let's say I want to try to finish by 6. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to set a little timer for myself here, just because otherwise, this is what I do in my classes when I teach at the universities. So we've got half an hour for, let's say, like 7 minutes. We'll do like 7 minutes an artist, right? Not a lot of time, but this will just keep me on track. Otherwise, okay. So what do we have next? We have the Chris O'Feely paintings here. And this one, again, this was a painting that I had wanted to make for a long time. I thought this was going to be the shortest, the fastest painting that we were going to make of all the paintings, because it is a little bit more on the simple side of things, or at least appears that way. And then, as I think what happens, at least the way that I approach things, is sometimes it's those simple paintings where I start to kind of like, okay, well, there's not as much to do, so I'm going to take my time and really try to do a really good job on this. And it kind of slowed me down. So that's why this one ended up taking like, I don't know, 2.5 hours, 3 hours. So at the time, this was the longest that I had spent on any of the paintings. I think I mentioned at the time that I probably put a little bit too many lines on the side and kind of darkened it. There was also text written on the sides and down here that I removed. And so I think in almost every case, everybody kind of loosened up or lightened up on these lines on the side. So let's take a look at what you guys did here. So here's Deborah's version of the painting. Beautiful. And you can see it lightened up, not so many lines on these outside edges. That worked really well. The face, I think this face is particularly nice, and these legs. I feel like this painting lent itself really well to our class because it is already abstract, or abstracted from the original, from an actual runner. That is like a really great kind of painting to work from, because it gives you more freedom just to kind of explore and not worry so much about getting it right, quote unquote right. Great colors. I don't know if there's nothing I can say about here let's go back down to the bottom here. Let's zoom in here. Vania's version of this painting. Very cool. Wow, these fingers, fantastic. This is great. What's nice about this is the figure is so much bigger than mine. And so we really can see a lot more of the detail. One thing is it becomes a little bit less clear that this is supposed to be some sort of like vase or Greek pottery. Maybe because this line is kind of missing. Is it a big deal? No, not at all. But just sort of, it's one of those details that you've made a decision to kind of to change. Really cool. I actually really like the way that you've done this face. I'm just looking at the differences between mine and yours. And, there's mine and yours. I think I'm really pleased with the way yours turned out. Really cool. Okay, let's look at what did Shelley do here. Whoa. Oh, I love how you put the text in there. Oh, now I see a few of you guys also put the text in there. I think it worked really well. So maybe if I was to do this over again, maybe I would put that text in there. I feel like that text might have been a really important part of the painting that I just removed for some odd reason. Yeah, this is a lesson to learn. You know, one of the opportunities we have is to remove or change things, or move them around. And I chose to eliminate it entirely. And now, in retrospect, I'm looking at this. I feel like, oh, maybe that should have been there. This person is really cool. Great job. And I actually really like all the dots that you put in the head. That turned out fantastic. And also, just the way you've done it, you were able to incorporate this black line at the bottom, which I wasn't, because I didn't have the room for it. And so your figure was much smaller, and you were able to incorporate all these details. So that's fantastic. And same thing here with Charmaine, did the same thing. Was able to incorporate this line on the bottom, and more subtle use of these lines on the outside, which was a smart idea. Definitely improving on mine for sure. I also think it's kind of interesting how you didn't go all the way up to the edges. Maybe there was tape or something keeping the paper down. But I think that also was kind of a nice little addition or change. Let's go here to Peter. How am I doing on my time here? Okay, I got 2 minutes left for Chrysophilia here. Great job, Peter. Again, you use the text. The text turns out to be a really important part of this painting. Look how many people were like, I'm going to put it there. This guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And you guys are right. So that works really well. I think it's kind of, there's something really satisfying about how kind of straight these lines are. Did you use a ruler? I feel like I see like the marks of a ruler here or something. But that's cool. Good job. I'm so glad that other people, you guys are making this painting, because I love the original print, or I'm not sure exactly, watercolor painting that this was based on. And so it's so neat to see other people using it and working on it. Great job, May. Wow. Look at this. Like the amount of, I can see like really clearly you getting better and better and better and better from painting to painting. That is so exciting. As a teacher, that's like the most satisfying thing you can imagine. So I can see, look, the level of control that you have with all of these lines here versus when you first began is like night and day. And that is really, really exciting. I'm really proud of you. That's fantastic. Because all of this detail was hard. That's why it took me so long to do this painting that I thought was going to go so super fast. So that's great. Wow. And then, wow, Iris. Wow. These are cool. Good job. And again, like this, the painting text like that is, that's my time limit. I'm going to move on to the next artist in a minute here. Painting this kind of cursive text is really tough. That's probably one of the reasons in my mind that I did do it, because I was like, well, this might be asking a lot of people, and people are going to get really frustrated. So the fact that so many of you decided to do it anyway, it makes me really excited, because you probably thought, you know what, I could do this. And you can. You look at that. That is awesome. Very cool. So, I mean, I see one thing here. There's a lot of extra room down at the bottom. So I think, and I don't know if this is canvas. You may want to think of, there could be something. I think he had signed his name and said like London 2012 or something on the bottom. So it feels like there's a bit of space for something here. Or if this is paper, you could obviously just cut the bottom off. But that's fun. That's really cool, you guys. Wow. And then Deborah, did I already talk about Deborah's painting off the top? I can't remember. But again, this is fantastic. Cool. Yeah, again, like all these the lines that you guys, I mean, I think that's what's good about me doing this, is you can kind of, I know there's a number of you who watch the episode and then afterwards go back, watch it again while you're actually making the painting. So you're probably like, oh, I remember he later on said, don't do this or that, and then you guys make those changes and make the paintings better because of it. So here is our next painting. We'll move on to David Hockney's dogs here, sleeping dogs. And I'm just going to open up your artwork. Okay. So this, I'm a huge David Hockney fan. And again, it's really exciting to be able to share his artwork with people. I remember, just as a quick little aside, I remember when I went to art school in Los Angeles, and I remember part of going to school is we had to, or to the application process, write down 4 or 5 artists that we really, living artists that we really admired. And David Hockney was one of those artists that I put down. And then I remember I got into the school, and I, went for drinks that first night with the other 6 people who were accepted into the program. A very small program called the Art Center in Los Angeles, and we all went like, so who are the 5 people you? And then of course, like, and I was from Calgary, like a small town in Canada, compared to like all these other kids from New York and Chicago and Paris and all these other, and when I said David Hockney, they're all like, oh, like, man, this guy from like the podunk town in the prairies, like David Hockney is so unfashionable, because back in the day he was sort of seen as a bit of like a celebrity artist, somebody who kind of overstayed his welcome a little bit. And what's exciting is, as time has continued, David Hockney has, I don't think he ever wasn't a good artist, but I think he's been re-embraced by the art world and acknowledged as the great artist that I know that he is. Anyway, long story short, I think it's interesting to think of how tastes change, and I think all those people who were around kind of poo-pooing my idea, my feelings about David Hockney, would probably deny that conversation ever happened, that they've always been a big fan of his. Just like, some people, will, talk that way about musicians, but they listen to it as a guilty pleasure. Any Bieber fans out there, or Celine Dion fans out there? In fact, you know what? I got to take a quick little detour talking about that. Just because this is a book that I talk to my students about all the time. Okay, I'm bringing this up. Just kind of, I strongly encourage people read this very small book. It's like the size of like a smartphone. It's like a small little book, like a couple 150 pages. It's called Let's Talk About Love. Here's a close-up on the cover. I actually took this book with me. I did a project where I went up to the North Pole with the Royal Canadian Air Force, and this is a library book that I brought with me. And I thought this is such an interesting book because it's about this guy who is not a Celine Dion fan, Celine Dion, the singer, and can't stand her music, can't understand why people like her music. So I don't know if his editor or somebody's like, you should investigate this. Like, why do people like this? So he ends up doing this whole investigation, travels around the world, trying to figure out why, like, you know, because he interviews like hardcore gang members in Brazil who drive around blaring her music, and like, why would and then he starts going, he goes and watches her shows, and the more he kind of immerses himself in that music, the more he starts to learn to really like that music. And so I just thought that was kind of brave of him, but I think it's also something I think about most artists should try to do is kind of exposing ourselves to art that we don't like and trying to figure out what other people like about it. And I think that's a great way of building empathy, and I think we need more empathy in our world today, especially in such a polarized political climate. Anyway, probably like just blasted right through. Okay, I'm going to set my timer again for David Hockney here. So we'll come back to Susan's painting here in a second. Just sort of looking at my painting, I was pretty happy with the way this one turned out. There's a few things that in his original, there's really nice warmth coming through on the bellies of these dogs, and I kind of bungled a little bit and put too much white into these washes over top of it. So I would have done a little bit differently here, because that white sort of, it kind of makes, like, there's a lot of life in these dogs, and this is kind of the warmest part of a dog, is its belly, right? And by putting this cool or this tint over top of it, kind of waxified the character a little, or these dogs, and made them look maybe a little bit like they're in a funeral home and they're being preserved, right? So that was one of the things, like, as I was doing it, I'm like, but small problem, but I think it's one of those things when you realize it, it's just like notes for next time, right? You take that, it's like a tool, you put it into your tool belt, and like, okay, next time I'm doing this, lay off a little bit. So let's go over here to Susan's painting. Wow, this is cool. I think it's photographed a little bit dark, so I can't quite see some of the details in here. But nice, beautiful colors. I really like this blue that's in the shadows. That was working kind of nice too. And even more so than mine, this dog looks very, very comfortable. They both look very comfortable, but this one really feels like it's in dreamland. Beautiful job. Here's Sue's painting. Very good. Again, it's a little bit of a reflection on that original. Let me see, can I zoom in here? A couple quick little tiny details. Everything is working really well. A few things I feel like we're missing is a little bit of the, maybe just a couple little brush strokes on the side of these cushions to make them look a little more cushion-like. Because right now they're a little bit of kind of unidentified seating objects, USO. It's like we kind of want a little more definition into here as to like maybe some quick little wrinkles and things. I think that would help, and a little bit more on the shadowy end, a little bit too subtle in that way. Great job, otherwise, very well done. Okay, here's Charmae. Great painting. So you can see what I was just talking about is some of these kind of wrinkles in this fabric on these cushions. Great job. And You can see here, unlike mine, you've left more of the belly, less of that intense tone over top or in tint over here. So these are great, these little puppies. Beautiful job. Okay, and May, wow, look at this. So let's zoom in here. So this, I think you've done a fantastic job with the cushions. Fantastic job with the cushions. And this dog right here is fantastic. What is so cool about this is you can almost count the brush strokes you've got in here. Like there's maybe 30 brush strokes in this entire dog, right? You've got one brush stroke here, maybe two that you've done this in, like one or two. And so it's the economy of mark making in this painting which is really satisfying, right? And that's, you know, one of the things that all artists strive for is an efficiency of communication. Is what is the fewest things I need to do in this painting to make it convincing and make like people understand what it is. I will say that this other dog here is a little bit vague. Like it's a little, you know, it's where its head is, like this, I think we can identify as an eye, but it's lacking a little bit of the detail that we see here. But that's, you know, it's tricky. I mean, here you've pulled one off with just a few brush strokes and you've made it really work. This one, you know, I mean, mine is also a little bit of a blob, so it's, but I think what's really encouraging is if you can do it once right here, and this is like a masterful painting of a dog, you can do it elsewhere, right? That's the main important thing to learn. Okay, here's Laura's painting of these dogs. I just find dogs super adorable and funny. I'm a dog lover myself, so I always think they're such goofy animals. What's to say that hasn't been said? This looks great. Again, in the future, what I would have done is laid off a little bit on some of the white on the belly, but you know, and it's quite hard. We could have gone back over it. This one would be a little bit trickier to fix. And again, that's the reason why, like, the original paintings that David Hockney did probably sell for about $1 million each. And they're not too much bigger than this. So there's a different, you know, we did all these paintings and there's a couple of little things that could be improved in each one. And our paintings are however much anybody would pay for them, maybe $20, $100, $1,000, depending, versus his are considerably more in value because he's a master and he pulled it off with just those few little brush strokes. But you can see we're getting better and better, right? Here's Iris's version of this. Fantastic. Wow, look at, okay, so maybe more so than anybody so far, you pulled off this other dog. That's very convincing, that ear. And you know, even David Hockney, when he painted this, like I tried to paint mine fairly faithful to the original, and that because of that dog's ear and kind of turned into a bit of a blob. Whereas maybe it looks like Iris was like doing the right thing, which was to be like, okay, I got to make my painting live on its own, so I'm gonna have to make a few changes to like improve on David Hockney's to make it more convincing, which is the right strategy, right? That's not what I did, but that's why yours is really successful. Great job, Iris. Donna, wow, that is cool. Look at that. This is very, very expressive, really nice contrasts in these, like these brush strokes and the cushions. Beautiful. Wow. And all the colors are working really well. Now, I will say these dogs, you know, the faces on the dogs kind of, they are a little bit hard to see, but what I do like is that it feels more like very like expressive, or there's an abstraction to them in that, you know, do I know that these are two dogs? Like this one has a bit of a penguin kind of quality. All of these dogs do because of the tiny little arms. So in that way, does it look exactly like two dogs laying on a cushion? There's a little bit of changes that could be made to make that happen. But do I mind that it doesn't, that they're a little bit different looking? No. In fact, again, and this goes back to what is so exciting about you guys. The more and more that you're doing these, the more that your own style starts to kind of bleed through, right? You're taking my lessons, and then you're sort of just finding your own kind of pathway in there. And then what makes me exciting is that you did this painting. You've made some of these changes, which make it a little bit more, the likeness of the dog has kind of disappeared a little bit, but it still seems really effective. Like, this reminds me of like Francis Bacon, the painter, British painter, is that he really kind of played like with shape, particularly kind of faces as they're moving, and we get this kind of blurring kind of quality. So there's a lot of really cool things going on in here. So I would just say that I really, really like this painting, despite some of the things that person might say are problems to it. I think this is, yeah, so here's just closer up. This is great. Again, just like, who was it? Iris here. Both of you guys have really, brought back the features of this dog. So I could feel like this sleepy dog right here. More so, I think you and Iris are the two ones that really captured that really, really well. Great colors, like the subtle use of these blues in here, way better than mine. Absolutely. Good job, and great here with this cushion. Really nice. Wow, you guys, this is a good group. Wow, what a great group of students here. Sometimes I tell my wife, I'm like, sometimes I feel like I'm being put on here, and that this is like, all of you guys already know how to paint really well and are just humoring me. So let's go to the next one here. So how are we doing? We got Herring, Cassat, and Cats. Okay, well, there's a lot of Keith Haring. So, but I also think that we could probably burn through these Keith Haring paintings pretty quickly, because they are a little bit more on the simpler side of things, depending on how you see it. So let's see my version of them here. So here's number 1, and then number 2 here. I was pretty happy with these paintings. I did feel like maybe this blue here could have been a little bit more, there's kind of a little bit more pastel than I think it could be. It could be a little bit more intense, as we'll see a few other people have a little bit more intense colors. Overall, I felt pretty good with them. Like, they're really nice and iconic looking, right? Which is really kind of one of the fun parts of painting Keith Haring paintings, is that look of just like, you could spot it from across the street, right? You put this in your window and then walked across the street, it would be the first thing you would see, because they're just like like the contrast between white and black, red and black and white, right? Or all of these colors make for very iconic images, right? They stick out like a Pepsi logo or something, right? And which is maybe part of the point, or one of Keith Haring's kind of intentions. So let's take a look at the art that was produced here. So here's Susan's versions of these paintings. Beautiful job. You can see she went right up to the edge here with the black, as opposed to I left a little bit of a white edge. Looks great. I think this one in particular works. The one on the right works really, really well. You can see, these nice big, same one we have here. The one little difference is part of Keith Haring is like the line width stays pretty much the same throughout the entire painting. And so we have some areas in yours where we have these really big, thick brush strokes, and then here where we get very thin. Is it a problem? That's up to you to decide. I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. It's just sort of up to you, right? As you know, when you look at these, again, we start seeing people's own personality coming through here. So here's Shelley's version of these paintings. Very cool. What I like about this is I could feel like you've moved this figure up a little bit. And these are also, you've used a square piece of paper, which is also a little bit different. And maybe it looks like you also changed the position of this arm to make it work a little bit better for you, which is great. I like seeing that. I like seeing making changes as opposed to throwing it out or something. Here's another by Shelley. Very cool. Yeah, I don't have anything to say about these. As I said, I think we could probably go through these a little bit faster. I think they are all working really, really well. Beautiful. That was Charmae. Here's another one by Charmae. Again, these figures a little bit thinner here than some of these marks. It's pretty hard. I think you might have a greater appreciation for Keith Haring in that keeping a consistent line weight and width as we go around a shape and doing that in multiple places is really tough, right? It's actually easier to kind of go and have wider and thinner lines. So it's pretty tough to actually modify it, or to keep it consistent, sorry. Here's May's version. Great job. Very cool. Wow, look at these. And I like the consistent, you know, like these, did a really good job of keeping all these consistent. Very cool. Here's your other one, May. Great job. Wow. Very cool, you guys. Here's Iris's version. It looks like these are a little bit thinner, these kind of radiating lines. This is Radiant Baby is the name of the painting. So they're a little bit thinner than, you know, you've actually done the opposite. Some other people have very thin lines for the body and then really thick lines for here. So, you know, same thing. I actually think in this painting it works a little bit better than here. It feels a little bit like there's some empty space around here. This one I feel like it might even be an improvement, right? Because he had quite thick lines. Oh, where did this? Whereas you've used the thinner lines. It works really well, although it does feel like there's a bit of empty space in some of these kind of corners, right? So, but you know, again, I think this I think was maybe I had a lot of fun painting these, but again, just like when we were painting Chris Ophelia, I thought, wow, this is gonna go by pretty fast, and then I think it's because there's less. It's sort of like if you have if you're a hoarder and you have a whole, your house is super messy. Well, you spill a cup of coffee on the carpet, people may not even realize it, right? It just blends into all the other stuff. Whereas if you have like a super, super clean apartment or an empty house that you're showing, you're a real estate agent and you drop your coffee on the carpet, there's like nothing else in the room but a white carpet with a black coffee stain, all right? So it really stands out. So I think that's partly when we do these simple ones, it's kind of almost, in a way, any kind of deviation from the original really sticks out. Right, so they can actually be in some ways more difficult because of that. These are great, right? I mean, sorry, here's Gail's. Worked out really. I like how you signed them too, right there. That's a great little place for the signature. Both of these turn out great. And Deborah's, these looking really fine. Good job here. Actually, it's kind of interesting. It looks like you kind of outlined it a few times here. But it actually works well, especially for this composition, because it does sort of look like it's radiating outwards. Good job. Well done, you guys. Okay, so what is next on our ticket? Okay, Alex Katz. So, that's interesting. Details here, like it looks like there's little spots, but when I look at it, I can't even see that at all in the original. Anyway, it's funny how the camera changes things. Okay, so Alex Katz. This one, my Mary Cassatt painting is upstairs. So, maybe the Mary Cassatt painting we have hanging on the wall in our living room. So I don't know if my wife is watching. If she's watching, if you want to bring that painting down, if not, then we'll move Mary Cassatt on to the next time we do one of these. But she's upstairs with our daughter, getting ready for dinner. So if so, that just would be what we'll do. So we'll move on to Mary Cassatt, to Alex Katz, and so this painting. This is definitely one of those paintings where I left the painting feeling unsatisfied with my results, feeling like I didn't really achieve a likeness of the original. And because when I saw them side by side, all I could do was think of all the places where I had sort of made mistakes and places where it deviated from the original. And that was, especially when you're painting people's faces, that can be really frustrating. And I'm like not immune to those feelings at all, right? And I think that's important for you guys out there to also know, is that I have those feelings. Leonardo da Vinci had those feelings. Every artist has those feelings of like, something just wrong, like something just a little bit off, and it's frustrating. But I think that's why artists keep on painting, is we just never feel quite satisfied. It's like, I'm gonna have to come back to that and do it again. So anyway, with Alex Katz here, however, once I turn the computer off and I have this painting all by itself, I can feel like, actually, kind of did a good job. I'm kind of happy with this painting, right? It was maybe the nose is a little bit long or something, but overall, I kind of like it. It works. And that's, I'm telling you guys to the same thing that I have to give myself advice for. Is like, don't worry about making it exactly like the original. It's got to live on its own. And this painting now lives on its own, and I'm happy with it now. But at the time, it was driving me nuts. So let's take a look at the versions that you guys have done here. So here's Deborah's version of the painting. I think she did a fantastic job. I think the features are really great. It looks like there's a little bit of some white. This one was really, really tricky. And again, this is not just the face that's tricky, but painting people's face, like the getting skin texture and and it to look convincing and not waxy is tricky. And that's why, one of the reasons why I thought, well, let's do an Alex Katz painting, because he's probably one of the easier portrait, the persons who's painted portraits to do. And boy, was I surprised. Like, these paintings are way more complicated than I imagined they would be. And that's something you don't even really think about until you start painting. You follow this process. Anyway, so this would be just something that, as we, I'm sure probably as all of you were, when you're like, oh, this is a little bit tricky, and because you probably saw me working and reworking some of these areas, and you're like, he's really kind of having a little bit of trouble here, right? So, and I think that might be reflected in some of the paintings that you guys have sent, where you're experiencing some of the same sort of difficulties. Having said that, at the end of the day, I think all of these paintings work really well. They're just maybe a little bit more, you know, you're going to see that they all look very different. Like the faces look a little bit different, and the way that they're painted will look a little bit different. So Deborah says, it was difficult and could use your critique. Yeah, I mean, I think I think probably what it would be, we are going to do another portrait in a few weeks. I'll talk about the schedule right before we end today. But we are going to do another portrait a little bit later. It is a portrait of a woman who's mostly kind of in shadow, so we won't have to deal with quite so many difficulties with this one in the face. But I think just the only thing I would say is just sort of integrating some of this into the shadow, so that, because right now there's a little bit of this slightly kind of pasty white over some of this darker area, and I almost think it's either keeping them like this line a little bit sharper or bringing that same color down into here, and same sort of thing in here. Like, so for instance, this is an area where you have a strong shadow. It looks like actually you did it here and here, but you brought that little bit of white over top of there. And I think I also think this probably looks different in person than it does on the computer screen. And I think maybe we'll see as we go here other versions of this that we'll kind of see. So here's Gail's version of the painting. So, you know, and I think in your message it said there was maybe a little bit, the chin and the cheek needed a little bit of work. That's just in the drawing part of it. I think, you know, I think if we did add a little bit more, we did a little constructive surgery on this, that might help it a little bit. I also it doesn't bother me, really, to be quite honest. There are plenty of examples of artists who are very famous who painted just like this. And so I think actually works really well. I mean, I think, again, if you're going for something really, really realistic, sure, there's changes we could make to bring it into that arena. On the other side of things, I always would encourage people just to keep on going and kind of allow some of the kind of unique aspects of your own painting process to kind of come through. So I think actually the way that you've painted this, Gail, in terms of the skin is really effective, right? Like really kind of, there's really nice, we see kind of on this darker side here, it does feel a little bit darker and a little bit lighter on this side and on the nose, and a little bit of shadow on this side of the nose. So it all works. It's just maybe a little bit more drawing to bring it, to make it, to fix those kind of changes that you felt that you might need. But I think actually in terms of the way it's painted, is really well done. Probably one of the most successful in the class, right? Wow, look at this iris. So this looks like a Alex Katz painting. Wow, like it looks maybe a little bit different than his, but I don't know if you're familiar with his work at all, but you really nailed the look of an Alex Katz painting here. Whoa, sorry. The colors and some of these little tiny outlines there, that's really effective. That's great. So, you know, part of, yeah, it's like, that's really stunning. That's great. So you could see, like, mine, I was going for a much more kind of subtle, kind of realistic look, versus you really captured the flat kind of aspects of Alex Katz's paintings that he's really famous for, with these very striking kind of, it looks almost like a print in that way. Really good job. And here's Laura's version of the painting. I think this is really great. I think this is the same sort of thing we were talking about with Deborah's painting here. A little excess white in there that kind of gives it a little bit of a pastier kind of feeling. But but I don't mind it. I certainly don't mind it. I think it would just be a little bit, we want to just lay off a little bit of the white. So maybe what I would say is, you know, if we were to do this again, is just adding white in thin layers rather than kind of looks like a little bit thick, more thickly applied. But this was a tricky painting. I mean, come on, you guys. I mean, I didn't even realize. It's one of those things, like I've said a number of times tonight, that's one of those things that I go into it thinking, okay, this is going to be pretty straightforward. This will be on the E, and then I'm like, whoa, oh, my goodness, this is trickier than I thought. Oh, wow, May, great job. Okay, so, wow, again, I think the actual way that you've painted the skin is quite effective. There's maybe a little bit of like proportions, you know, maybe her face is a little bit longer, but you know, to be honest, I think it's all there. And the only thing I would say is right now this is a little bit of on the greener side of a brown. And I think if we just had a little bit more red mixed into this skin tone, that would be great. And, you know, I did show you those images of Matisse where he had literally a green stripe going right down the face. So there's nothing inherently wrong with this in any way. I think it's really effective. Again, you should be really, I mean, I think of all the people so far, May, we can see the greatest improvement in your work for sure. How are we doing here? Okay. So I don't know if my wife can hear, but there is that Mary Cassatt painting right next to the high chair, that if you're able to bring that down, I guess I could talk about that painting without having here. Okay, so here's Charmaine's version. This is, again, super interesting how she's made this decision to really keep these two to add this really contrasting colors here, this bright yellow, bright blue, back to back, and man, it makes it, in my mind, you start to see kind of a story that develops here, like the blue is the past and the yellow is the future or something, right? Because our minds always want to make a story out of something. And I think also you've painted the face really, really well. So again, I don't know if you're certainly improving on my own versions here. Here's Shelley's version of the painting. Wow. Again, this is really well done. The face, like the way the colors that you put on here, right? It looks like you've managed to get some of this white and these grays, but very subtle. Like I feel like I can see a number of layers of paint in here. So that's working really well. I think the nose is maybe a little bit long. That's a proportion thing, but just being able to paint this way is really, like, to be able to nail that kind of painting is, if you can do that, then the proportions are, you can just project it on, like using the Warhol technique to get your features in exactly the right place. That's the easy part. It's the painting of the skin, which is the most difficult thing, right? That's what makes people like Leonardo da Vinci and Raphael such like masters, is that their ability to paint that way. Wow, Sue, this is great. Oh, this is cool. So what's nice here, we can still see the underpainting of this red in here, and then we've got this white over top of it. I think the only thing I would say is I feel like we need a little bit of paint over top in this area, the darker shade. You can keep a lot of this. I would just say we'd want the same color, maybe almost like this, but with a little bit more purple, like black in there, to create the darker side in these shadows. So I think this is really effective. You've done a really good job on these parts of the face, and leaving some of these parts and letting the underpainting shine through is really tough. Like, I think it's hard for you. We want to cover everything up all the time, so you've done a really good job in this instance. You guys are doing better than me. And then, oh my goodness, Vania. Whoa, where did this come from? That's great. Wow. I think arguably this is the most effectively drawn face of all of them, like just proportionally in features better than mine. I think you've done this face is a really beautiful face. And the way that you've painted these eyes and lips, really effective. I think, maybe we could have had a little bit more contrast in the skin here, getting a little bit darker on these darker side of things. But, again, we're in a beginner's class, and you guys are painting portraits, and you're doing better than, I would say, probably like even some of the students graduating from university right now. That is like mind-boggling, right? So if you're coming away from this feeling like, I didn't quite do as good as I think, it's like you're doing better than people who've been in art school for 4 years. Like, it's time to kind of pump the brakes on the negative self-talk, right? Like, these are amazing, you guys. So don't be so hard on yourselves. So let's see. I think I want to talk about the Mary Cassatt painting, even though I don't have mine here, which is a good thing. Again, I'm hanging it in our living room because I thought it turned out pretty well. So the fact that I don't have it maybe says something good about it, right? So let's start here. Do I have my version of the painting handy? Let me see if I can find it really quickly. Okay, here we go. This is just about as good as showing you the actual thing. We'll show a photograph of it, so we just talk about it. Okay, so here's my version of this painting. And I felt pretty good after having finished this. I think parts of it that I was really quite pleased with the figure and the face, the floor, and here areas that because the original painting was quite narrow. So this whole side of the painting didn't really exist until we painted it, so we really expanded that area. And so this couch, I think it's a couch, and the shadow underneath, all this stuff was not really included in her painting, and we were trying to kind of make it up, invent details that we don't actually see. I felt like this should be darker down here, but I was a little bit timid in putting a dark shape down here because I didn't want it competing with it. So there are strategies I could have used to, like, including putting some white and gray in there so that it's darker, but it's not leaping out at us. The other thing I would say is that Mary Cassatt painted this blue-green background much in a different way than I did. And again, I was a little bit, I kind of fell in love with the way that this looked and was hesitant to change it because I was like, yeah, okay, I could paint it just like she did, but I kind of like the way this is looking, so I kept it. which again is totally fair. You know, if your intent is to make a reproduction of this painting one-on-one, then you can kind of go back and look what she did. But again, that's not really my interest in making these paintings. It's about kind of having some fun, quite frankly. So whatever I have to do to make it have more fun, I'm going to take that road. Okay, so here we're looking at Vania's painting here. She's got a couple of her other paintings in the background. This looks great. I think there is a little bit, slightly more cartoony quality to the way that the figure is executed, which doesn't bother me in any way whatsoever. I'm working on a comic book myself, and when I'm not doing this, so I don't have anything wrong with cartoons or comics in any way. It's just maybe a little bit like just her head is much bigger than the rest of her body, so it makes her look a little bit out of proportion. Is it a problem? No, not at all. I also think, I looks like this is the photograph because it looks like the colors are muted, but I don't think they're quite as muted as this. So I think there's probably a little bit dark or a little bit brighter colors, more saturated colors in your original painting. So let's now let's keep on going here. Let's look at Sue's version of this painting. Wow, look at that pink. So, wow. So what's interesting here is you've got this bright blue and bright pink and yellow. So there's the contrasts in here are heightened much more than I did, and even Mary Cassatt did. Hers was a little bit more on the muted side of things. Like, boy, oh boy, the Impressionists, they got a lot of flack, but if they had used these bright colors back then, they really would have been rounded up and taken to the city limits and dropped off. Because this would have been very radical. And it doesn't bother me, and I don't think it's wrong. It's just a little bit more of a contemporary approach to Impressionism. Right? There's no Impressionist, even Monet in his wildest experiments would not have allowed himself to use the color this brightly. That was an innovation of the Fauvist painters, led by most famously Henri Matisse. I think as I'm going here, my throat dries up. I'm less able to faithfully pronounce European names and give the full flavor of the this looks, anyway, so long story short here, great version of this painting. The beautiful colors, the brush strokes are really nice. I think what I would say is this back here is a little void of, I feel like it wants just a little bit more. Like kind of what you've got here in the couch works really well. Like I guess you could say everywhere else we see lots of, we sense several layers of paint. Like so for instance, look at the blue. This is really actually closer to the way Mary Cassatt actually painted this background. So kudos to you, Sue, for doing that. So we could see several layers of paint, and our brain is having trouble figuring out how it was painted. And that is where you really catch a viewer, where they're just like, what? How does that, right? And that's a great thing, because now you've stopped somebody in their tracks, and they want to figure it out, right? So this is working really well. So that's why I want to see more of that in here. And maybe in the original it's there. I just can't see it with in the way it's documented. But just doing it, you can still do it, but with a great deal of subtlety. And I think that would give this area a little bit more more energy. Otherwise, great job. Let's go here to Charmaine. Wow, cool. Look at these hands. That's a really nice thumb. Beautiful. And a lot more texture. You can see you really built up this couch. And down here, great job. And boy, oh boy, this looks like Paul Cézanne, the way that you've done this kind of, the background. is very effective. And here you can see developing this blank wall and just giving it these little touches of color hiding in beneath works really well. I also think the face is quite effective, really nice, and her dress. I would say there might be a little bit too much white or mixed into some of this paint, which is dulling it down. I think it works kind of well on the outer edges because there's like the light shining in from behind. It does look like it's, you know, part of this painting is the restraint that Mary Cassatt had. Like, she really allowed some of the original underpainting to come through, which is a part of the way the Impressionists worked, right? It's kind of like the chaos and then restraint. Like, there's, you know, with the way that the Impressionists painted and all these wild colors and kind of this like kind of out of focus look of a photograph, and yet like there's a part like Impressionists, you know, probably one of the reasons why they faced a lot of criticism is they, especially compared to classical paintings, looked like unfinished paintings. They, like, in many ways, classical paintings looked like Impressionist paintings that were just painted on 2 or 3 times longer. And so Impressionist paintings had a little bit of this unfinished underpainting kind of quality where they just were like, they had that restraint to like paint it, but then be like, I like it is now, I'm going to walk away, even though my training has told me it needs more work. So I feel like just a little, I mean, I think this is a gorgeous painting. I'm just saying, you may want to think about allowing a little bit more of like this color that we see here, which is, I'm 99% sure is your underpainting, is you want a little bit more of that to come through. Okay, let's go to, whoa, May, good job. Look at this. Okay, so this is, you know, very up the road with the Impressionists, right? So her face is kind of disappeared. We don't see all the details in her nose and everything, but that's fine. You know, almost universally with the Impressionists, the details in the features can be really hard to discern. Great job. I actually really like these kind of, there's a lot of energy and movement in this picture, and especially like the way that she's bent even more lends it with this like swirling energy in the floor and everything here, and lots of texture. You're really loading your brush with lots of paint on it. It looks great. And here's Laura's version of this painting. Can I bring, oh, I guess, oh, you know what? And now I see, because in the background, Laura, you've got one of the versions, this David Hockney painting, which you sent me. And you know what? We're going to have to do another episode where we just look at all the cool paintings you guys have sent me, because I'm just remembering that I've got a folder full of like maybe, how many? Let me just take a second here. Full of how many? I got 30 paintings that you guys have sent me of just your artwork that you've made in this class, but on your own outside of these projects. So we're going to have to do another one of these. I don't know if we'll do it next week. I might need the time off, but but that's, now you're just reminding me like, oh man, because boy, oh boy, when you guys see the painting that is behind the Mary Cassatt painting that Laura worked on, you're going to blow your mind. Like that, I was so excited when I saw that painting, Laura. So yeah, we'll have to, and pretty much all of those of you that are watching right now have sent me other things, and just time is going here. So okay, I love this painting. Looks great. What you could see, this beautiful kind of halo around here is working really well. Again, like I've said, like I do like. I can see, obviously, there's many layers underneath here. It still comes off as a bit of a flat wall. And so I think what I would suggest, although what I do like is I see these diagonal strokes in here, which actually works well, that it kind of, we have those diagonals and these diagonals. So it helps create a movement in the picture. So I'll take that back. I think that works really well. Again, lots of swirls down in here. And you did a good job of dealing with this couch, although I still think we would expect to see the bottom part of the couch and something a little bit darker. Again, I didn't do it, so I'm certainly not expecting anybody else to do it. Okay, here's Iris's version. Wow. Great job, Iris. This one is really nice. And you actually, of all the people, really turned this into an actual piece of furniture. Really well. Now it's making me think maybe this kind of piece of furniture would just sit on the ground, or maybe that's like the what do you call it, the curtain on the couch. You don't really see it on couches these days, but I remember as a kid, like every couch you would have like that little piece of fabric that would dangle and touch the carpet. Now it's the kind of the modern style where you see the legs and you can see right under the couch. So maybe that was the style. Anyway, it's making me think you've done a really good job. This is a really well done painting, Iris. And this wall is really nice too. Like again, there's an equivalent kind of, like the way I think you want to think about when you're making a painting is that every part of the painting has been given the same amount of care, right? So that, because I think one of the things, especially when we're painting people or animals or things that are recognizable, we end up spending a lot more time on those areas of the painting, right? We spend like, let's say you've got, 100 minutes to make a painting, often people will spend 50 minutes on the face and then allocate the rest of the time to the rest of the body. Whereas here, I feel like you've spread your attention out over the course of the whole thing. And this fan is really well done. Now, these arms, are they a little bit longer than maybe they should be? Yeah. Is that a problem? No. Just look at a painter named El Greco, famous for his, he lived in the 1500s, famous for his elongated limbs. Egon Schiele, Gustav Klimt. Again, there are artists out there who have blazed a trail in all these different directions. So having kind of playing with human proportions, exaggerating them there's nothing wrong. There's plenty of people who've shown us that you can make it work. This is great painting. This is you've done a lot of great paintings, Iris, so this is definitely right up there as one of your best for sure. And this face is fantastic. Gail, whoa, cool. So again, I really like the figure here, kind of different. All these faces have a different personality, right? And her fan did a great job. The background, this here is like I said a few other places, a little bit void of attention. But the couch, I love these kind of spirally kind of squiggles in here. That works really well. And the floor, you've done really nice subtle transition between to get her shadow in. And the background is really well done too. Good job, Gail. Right, and you nailed all the skin tones, perfect. Deborah, whoa, look at this. That's fantastic. Wow, you really feel the movement down here, swirling about. I think you've got her dress, everything here. Her face works really well. The fan, I think it's the couch and this wall that could use a little bit more love, but they're not the central parts of the picture. And as I'm saying all this, what I want to make clear too is these are great paintings. You guys make great paintings, and I'm just sort of like being a bit of a nitpick, right? Who's just like, wow, you could do this little tiny thing, and it would get 2% better, right? I guess I'm also, when I'm teaching at Emily Carr, I have students who'll get like a 98% on a project, and I'm like, you've done this is probably one of the best projects, and they're like, yeah, but how do I get an A+? How do I get those extra 2? This is like one of the best things I've ever seen, and you want to know how you can make it like even better? Well, I mean, I guess that's, but sometimes people really obsess over those things. So Those are just the tiny little details that I'm suggesting to make it even better. Now, let me see. And to close out, here we have Shelley's paintings of Mary Cassatt. Now, she has sent in 2 versions of this painting, and this is why I want to end here for the night, is because this is her first version of the painting, and she wasn't particularly happy with the figure. I think she was satisfied with kind of everything else, but was not happy with the figure, and then went back and did it again. And my goodness, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, you guys? What a home run. So again, like, look at the difference between her first version. It's like, it's good. It works really well. I don't have anything really negative to say about it. But the second one is like an absolute home run. Like the figure drawn much better, in much better proportion. The way everything's painted is much better, right? And so you can really clearly see how she's learning from the experience of making the first painting into the second painting, right? Like it's hard to even believe that this is the same painting or same artist who made these 2 paintings. The leap forward. So, that's why I think it's really helpful for you guys to work on the same painting a second time, because you're going to get better and better each time you do it. Wow. Again, this took me longer than I was expecting. I was expecting we'd be able to get through all of your other paintings you guys have sent me. But if I do that, we're going to be here. I miss my daughter, having dinner with the family and giving our daughter a bath, things that I love doing, and I'm sure my wife could use the help. So I will say that we should bring things to an end. And let me see here. So let's yeah. So if you have enjoyed today's episode, please like and subscribe to the channel. Share it with your friends and family. Put it on your Facebook, your Twitter, your Instagram, or wherever else you like to share your information and what you're up to. Thank you guys so much for sending all these images in. As a reminder, there is that new Facebook group that my wife has created for us. So please share your images on there as well, and there's the link to that is in the image description below. So join up. And if you want to make a small PayPal donation, the link is below. Or if you want to send it to me another way, just go onto that Facebook page, send me a message, and then I'll send you an email as well, so that you can send money in however other way you'd like to do so, because I do certainly appreciate that, and that all of this stuff around here has been funded by generous donations from people like you. On Tuesday, in our very next class, we're going to be painting a painting by one of the great Impressionist painters, Morisot. She was one of, like Mary Cassatt, one of the only 2 women that were a part of the Impressionist movement, or officially a part of it, that were invited to exhibit with the guys. So we're going to do a painting of hers, and then on Thursday we're going to do a painting by a contemporary artist, Banksy. So that's going to be a lot of fun. We'll talk about all the other the art that we're going to be painting as we go forward. I haven't made all the images and the links to those videos yet. That's my plan over the next 24 hours. That's why you should subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, so when they are posted, you'll be able to find those videos very easily. Whew. Okay, thank you everybody for tuning in, watching, and I'm so glad that we have such an awesome community of such talented young painters, young and old, people of all different generations who are able to make art. So this gives, I think, for people that have not begun painting and are afraid of painting and don't think that they can do a good job, you guys set such a great example, right? That give other people confidence that they too can pick up this as a hobby and within a few months can be hitting home runs, making exceptional artwork. And you know, what other kinds of you know, if anyone could tell you that you could learn how to do any other hobby in a couple of months and be making great stuff that you could be hanging in your walls and impressing your friends and family with, I don't know, I'd be interested to know what those are, because you guys have certainly shown that it's possible to do with painting anyway. Okay, everybody. Well, have yourselves a wonderful rest of your evening, and we will see you in just a couple of days to work on our next painting. So enjoy the rest of the time until I see you again. Take a little bit of a rest, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.